Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall. The clock ticked loudly in the silence, each second a reminder of how stuck she felt. It had been months since she last felt like herself. Her once vibrant life had turned into a monotonous cycle of work. Eat, sleep, repeat. She tried to shake it off, but the weight of her thoughts was suffocating. "What's wrong with me?" she whispered to herself, running her fingers through her tangled hair. She had everything she thought she wanted: a stable job, a cozy apartment, and a few close friends. But something was missing, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It wasn't just the routine that was draining her. It was the memories, the ones she tried so hard to bury, the ones that crept into her dreams and left her waking up in a cold sweat. Her past was a shadow she couldn't escape, no matter how fast she ran. One night, after another restless sleep, Sophia found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror. Her reflection stared back at her. Tired and hollow, she traced the dark circles under her eyes, wondering when she had become this person. The confident, carefree Sophia she once knew seemed like a distant memory. As the days turned into weeks, the feeling of being trapped only grew stronger. She tried to distract herself, going out with Emma, binge-watching TV shows, even picking up yoga, but nothing worked. The emptiness inside her was a void that couldn't be filled. Then, one evening, it all came crashing down. Sophia was at a work event, surrounded by people laughing and chatting. She smiled and nodded along. But inside, she was screaming. The noise, the small talk, the fake smiles, it was too much. She excused herself and rushed to the restroom, locking the door behind her. Leaning against the sink, she took deep breaths, trying to calm the storm inside her. But the harder she tried, the worse it got. Tears streamed down her face as she slid to the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. She felt like she was drowning, and there was no one to pull her out. That night, Sophia made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this. She needed to face whatever was haunting her, even if it meant confronting the parts of herself she had been running from. It wasn't going to be easy, but she knew she had to try. Sophia's decision to confront her past didn't bring immediate relief. Instead, it opened a door to a world she wasn't ready for. The first step was the hardest. She reached out to a therapist. Dr. Harper, a woman with a calm demeanor and piercing blue eyes. Their sessions were grueling, peeling back layers of pain and regret Sophia had buried for years. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Sophia's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a name she hadn't heard in years: Mr. Anderson. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the text. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old cafe on 5th Street. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Don't be late." Sophia stared at the screen, her hands trembling. Mr. Anderson was a ghost from her past, a man she had tried to forget. But there was something in his tone, an urgency, a demand, that made it impossible to ignore. The next night, Sophia found herself sitting in a dimly lit corner of the cafe, her stomach in knots. She fiddled with her coffee cup, her eyes darting to the door every time it opened. Finally, he walked in. Mr. Anderson hadn't changed much, still tall, still imposing, with that same air of authority that made people stop and take notice. He slid into the seat across from her, his sharp business attire a stark contrast to the casual vibe of the cafe. "Sophia," he said, his voice low and steady. "It's been a while." She forced a smile, though her heart was racing. "What do you want, Mr. Anderson?" He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "I need your help. There's a project, a sensitive one, and you're the only one who can handle it." Sophia frowned. "Why me? I'm not the same person I was back then." "Exactly," he replied. "That's why I need you. You've changed, grown, but you still have the skills, the instincts. And this project, it's personal." Sophia's mind raced. She wanted to say no, to walk away and never look back. But something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, made it impossible. She felt a strange pull, a mix of curiosity and dread. "What's the project?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Anderson's lips curved into a faint smile. "I'll explain everything, but first, You need to agree. This isn't something you can walk away from once you're in. Sophia hesitated. She knew this was a turning point. A moment that could change everything. But the thought of saying no, of continuing to live in the shadow of her past, was even more terrifying. Okay, she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. I'm in. Mr. Anderson nodded, a satisfied look in his eyes. Good. Meet me at my office tomorrow. 10 a.m. sharp. As he stood to leave, Sophia felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. She had just stepped into a world she wasn't sure she was ready for. But there was no turning back now. Sophia's life had turned into a whirlwind since she agreed to Mr. Anderson's proposal. The project was more complicated than she had imagined, a high-stakes operation that blurred the lines between right and wrong. Every day, she found herself torn between her growing ambition and the nagging voice of her conscience. The first few weeks were exhilarating. Sophia was back in her element, using her skills to solve problems and outsmart competitors. She felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. But as the stakes grew higher, so did the moral dilemmas. One night, after a long day of strategizing, Sophia sat alone in her apartment, staring at the city lights outside her window. Her mind raced with thoughts of what she had done, and what she was about to do. The project required sacrifices, compromises she wasn't sure she could live with. Is this who I am now? She whispered to herself, her voice trembling. The next morning, she met with Mr. Anderson in his sleek, modern office. He was all business, his sharp business attire and commanding presence a constant reminder of the power he held. We're close, he said, his voice calm but intense. But we need to push harder. Are you ready for the next step? Sophia hesitated. The next step involved crossing a line she had sworn never to cross. She looked into his eyes, searching for some sign of doubt, but found none. What if I can't do it? She asked, her voice barely audible. Mr. Anderson leaned back in his chair, studying her. You can. You're stronger than you think. And this is bigger than you. Bigger than me. It's about the greater good. Sophia wanted to believe him, but the weight of her decisions was crushing. She thought about Emma, her best friend, who had no idea what she was involved in. She thought about her therapist, Dr. Harper, who had warned her about the dangers of losing herself. That evening, Sophia met Emma for dinner at their favorite spot. Emma was her usual bubbly self, chatting about her latest adventures and cracking jokes. Sophia tried to keep up, but her mind was elsewhere. Hey, are you okay? Emma asked, her brow furrowing with concern. You've been quiet all night. Sophia forced a smile. I'm fine, just tired. But Emma wasn't convinced. You know you can talk to me, right? Whatever it is, I'm here for you. Sophia's heart ached. She wanted to tell Emma everything, to unload the burden she was carrying. But she couldn't, not yet. As the days passed, the conflict inside Sophia only grew stronger. She felt like she was living a double life, one foot in the world of ambition and power, the other in the world of morality and guilt. One night, after another sleepless night, Sophia found herself standing on the rooftop of her building, the cool night air brushing against her skin. She stared at the city below, the lights twinkling like stars. What am I doing? She whispered, tears streaming down her face. She knew she had to make a choice, between the person she wanted to be and the person she was becoming. But the decision wasn't easy. It was a battle between her deepest desires and her conscience. A battle that could change everything. Sophia couldn't keep up the act any longer. The weight of her secrets was crushing her, and the guilt was eating away at her soul. It all came to a head one rainy evening when Emma showed up at her door, her face pale and her eyes filled with hurt. Sophia, we need to talk, Emma said, her voice trembling. Sophia's heart sank. She knew this moment was coming. But she wasn't ready. She stepped aside, letting Emma in, and they sat down on the couch, the tension thick in the air. I know something's going on, Emma said, her voice breaking. You've been distant, secretive, and now, I found this. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it to Sophia. It was a document related to the project. Something Sophia had accidentally left behind during their last hangout. Sophia stared at it, her hands shaking. She wanted to explain, to make excuses, but the words wouldn't come. What is this, Sophia? Emma asked, her voice rising. What are you involved in? Sophia took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't lie anymore. It's complicated, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Complicated? Emma repeated, her voice filled with disbelief. Sophia, this looks illegal, dangerous. What the hell are you doing? Sophia looked into Emma's eyes. Seeing the fear and disappointment there, it broke her heart. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, tears streaming down her face. But I got in too deep. I didn't know how to get out. Emma's expression softened, but the hurt was still there. Why didn't you tell me? I'm your best friend. I could have helped you. Sophia shook her head. I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of what you'd think of me. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain tapping against the windows. Finally, Emma spoke. You need to stop this. Sophia, whatever it is, it's not worth it. You're better than this. Sophia nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I know. I don't know how to fix it. Emma reached out and took Sophia's hand. We'll figure it out together. But you need to be honest with me. No more secrets. Sophia squeezed Emma's hand, feeling a glimmer of hope. For the first time in months, she felt like she wasn't alone. The next day, Sophia went to see Mr. Anderson. She walked into his office, her head held high, and told him she was done. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice steady. I'm out. Mr. Anderson's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Sophia thought he might argue. But then he nodded. I understand, he said, his voice calm. But remember, once you're in, there's no easy way out. Sophia didn't respond. She turned and walked out, feeling a mix of relief and fear. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it. The days that followed Sophia's decision to leave the project were a whirlwind of emotions. She felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety, like she had stepped off a speeding train but wasn't sure where she'd landed. Emma was by her side every step of the way, offering support and reminding her that she wasn't alone. But the fallout was inevitable. Mr. Anderson's warning echoed in her mind. Once you're in, there's no easy way out. Sophia knew she had made enemies, and the consequences of her actions were starting to catch up with her. One evening, as she was walking home from Emma's apartment, she noticed a car following her. Her heart raced as she quickened her pace. But the car kept its distance. When she finally reached her building, she glanced back and saw the car drive away, disappearing into the night. Sophia knew she couldn't ignore the threat. She reached out to an old contact, someone she had worked with years ago who had connections in law enforcement. They met at a quiet cafe, and Sophia explained everything. You're in a tough spot, her contact said, his expression serious. But if you're willing to cooperate, we can protect you. Sophia nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face whatever came next. Over the next few weeks, Sophia worked with the authorities to dismantle the operation she had been a part of. It was a long and grueling process, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Emma was her rock throughout it all, offering encouragement and reminding her of the person she used to be. You're doing the right thing, Emma said one night as they sat on Sophia's couch, sipping tea. I'm so proud of you. Sophia smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest. I couldn't have done it without you, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. Sophia had to testify in court, facing the people she had once worked with. It was terrifying, but she stood her ground, determined to make things right. When it was all over, Sophia felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. She knew her life would never be the same, but she was okay with that. She had learned the hard way that some changes are inevitable, and sometimes, they're for the best. Sophia decided to start fresh. She moved to a new city, taking a job at a small nonprofit that focused on helping people rebuild their lives. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful, and that was enough for her. As she stood on the balcony of her new apartment, looking out at the city skyline, Sophia felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, But she was ready to face it, on her own terms.